Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, we are going into the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember to get into the chat room, which is the only social media out there that's worth socializing in. That's at crusadechannel.com/chat. Follow Joe and I on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. Wherever you see our ugly New Jersey mugs, do something with a click to help us out a little bit as much as you could. And remember, a couple things. We do have our Patreon page. If you want to support us financially, you could drop a couple bucks in at patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And Veritas Catholic Network. Veritas Catholic Network. That is 1350 on your AM dial if you're in the Connecticut, Westchester, Northern Long Island area. We do have a Sunday afternoon interview show that's on there. And we just recently got permission, thank the good Lord, that after those shows air, we could then put them on our social media, which we will as they air. And we're going to put a bunch up. Our producer in Canada Jonathan Ross, is going to put those up on Saturdays. Okay. So we're rocking and rolling. We're growing. Subscribers are growing. The truth cannot be contained. It just can't. Tonight's one of those today, I should say, is one of those talks that we're going to have where we have to speak the truth about a topic that, quite frankly, Joe and I have not gotten into altogether that much, but we have to talk about it, which is China. China. All right? Because evidently, if you criticize a brutal communist regime that's killing tens of thousands of people, that's oppressing millions of people, that makes you a racist. So I guess if you fight against evil just because the evil happens to be perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party, evidently, according to the American left, that tells us we're supposed to oppose dictatorships and totalitarianism and genocide, which we're supposed to, but they seem to give China a pass. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about something. Everybody knows that Joe and I on this show, we cover politics, culture, and religion. And we try to infuse as much of our Catholic faith as we can into our show. When we're going to give you an example of someone after we lay out for you, okay, exactly what the Chinese Communist Party is all about, we're going to lay out for you and give you an example of somebody who's bearing witness to the truth, somebody to whom much has been given in life, all right? And he's a great, great example about how we're supposed to fight against these evil people, these brutal regimes, these anti-Christ, because ultimately that's what they are. They're anti-Christ, anti-Catholic. Particularly, we know that about China. So we're going to talk about that because we believe that it's about time that Joe and Joe, we got our hands a little dirtier, all right, and talk about the corrupt Chinese Communist Party. We got a little victory in Arizona, all right, thanks to the Supreme Court. We're not thanking the Supreme Court for much, but we think you'll agree this is a good step. Something good. We're going to talk about that. Evidently, Joe Biden, Joe Biden makes me just as sick as her husband. All right. Now, that's the truth. I'm sorry. Lord, forgive me. Don't like Joe Biden. I love her. I pray for her, but I don't like the woman. Evidently, we could all breathe easy again. Okay. Except babies in the womb. Okay. So according to her, we could breathe easy again that Joe Biden is our president, according to her. But don't be a baby in the womb because under the Biden regime, you're probably going to end up dead. Science, Joe, I thought with transgenderism, it's all about the science. They're not going to want to hear what Joe and I dug up about the science of transgenderism. We're going to get into that. Italy is going off the deep end. All right. Italy is starting to make moves or has made moves where they're going to, quote unquote, outlaw or ban homophobia. That means Catholic Church better watch out because that's who they're going after. And that's the Italians, a bunch of disgraziads, if you ask me. And we'll tell you exactly who's going to involved in that. Joe, maybe you and I, all right, maybe you and I should become leftists. Evidently, there's a lot of money in it. I mean, we covered Patrice Cullors a couple of weeks ago, all right? She's a communist, but she's living in the lap of luxury. Evidently, Stacey Abrams is doing pretty freaking good. So we had to talk about her. It was like I said, I don't want to be a leftist, but if it came down to I got to put food on the table. If Joe and I were doing a leftist activist show, then who knows, Joe? Maybe we can make a couple $2-3, yeah, as they say. The Senate, they're disgraziad. The Democrats in the Senate and the House, They're going full on with the filibuster. They're calling it racist, all this nonsense. They're so transparent, and we're going to break them down, especially the other. I've used disgraziad now 3 times, and we've only been on for about 5 minutes, okay? That other disgraziad in Ohio, I think it's Ohio, Tim Ryan. All right? And Andy Ngo, by the way, Joe, I think we're pronouncing his name wrong, but I don't care.
What is it?
I think it's Andy No. But we're going to call him, but we're going to call him Andy Ngo.
It's all good.
Andy, we love you, but we're going to call you. You got a G in there, pal. So if you got a G in there, we're going to pronounce the G. We're not silent types, so we don't do the silent thing. It's Andy Ngo. But him and the Babylon Bee basically were offered, I call it a quasi apology from big tech for having deplatformed them. And you know what they did? They turned around and they told them, "Kick rocks, we ain't coming back." Now, having said all that, let's get into China.
Well, like Joe said, we're going to talk a little bit about China, and we're going to talk about this gentleman, Jimmy Lai. He is a billionaire who is in jail. But first, we wanted to give a little background on the regime in China, particularly because they recently celebrated their 100th anniversary. A gentleman by the name of Stephen Mosher. He's on EWTN a lot, on Raymond Arroyo's show. He's very knowledgeable. He spent a considerable amount of time in China. And he wrote an article basically talking about the century of carnage. That's the title of the article. It was in LifeSite News. So we want to just highlight a few things, and I think it'll lead in well with the gentleman, Jimmy Lai, who's out of Hong Kong.
Let me just lay a little groundwork, Joe, because I want Joe to get into this because we're going to break it down. Just a quick note on Stephen Mosher. Stephen Mosher spent time in China, okay, when he was an atheist. He was pro-abortion, or let's call it pro-choice. In his case, I think pro-choice, okay? And he spent time in China, okay? Stephen Mosher is an expert on China.
He's got a bad hair game, though, dude. You ever see that?
Let's be respectful. But I am going to agree.
Not that I have a great one.
I have a no hair
But
game.
I mean, like, the beard and the whole deal, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. He reminds me of the dude from Bravo who used to do Lipton.
Oh, Lipton, who used to do.
He kind of reminds me. He could be like his lost brother.
But the difference is Lipton was annoying. Yeah. Stephen Mosher's not. But Lipton was annoying. But he was an atheist. He went there to study China's one-child policy. He was floored by it. Okay, came back to America, had conversations with different pro-abortion groups in America, and their response when he said, this is really not a good thing that they're doing. They're not pro-choice. They're forcing women to only have one child. And the response he said that he got was, well, they do have a lot of people in China. So, needless to say, just to put a finer point on it, Stephen Mosher became very disillusioned with both abortion and the left. He converted from atheism to Catholicism, and he's a faithful pro-life traditional Catholic. Okay, so that's Stephen Mosher, and he's super duper intelligent. Hit it, Joe.
So again, he wrote an article, "A Century of Carnage," and this was in LifeSite magazine. This is what he has to say. He said, "The Chinese Communist Party recently celebrated its 100th anniversary, a careful choreographed display of nationalist fervor not seen since the heyday of Mao. Mao's successor, obviously, we all know, is the General Secretary Xi Jinping. He told a massive audience assembled with military precision on Tiananmen Square that the era of China being slaughtered and bullied is gone forever."
Can we stop there a second?
Absolutely.
Okay. China was treated horribly by Japan. We know that in the 20th century. We covered it a little bit on this show. Go look it up. We're not going to get into it much. Go look up the rape of Nanking. Okay. Now, that was Japanese aggression against China. So nobody's going to say that it wasn't a brutal campaign by the Japanese against the Chinese, okay? Bullied? Seriously, Xi Jinping bullied? Who's the bully? You're the bully. And this is demonstrable, Joe Rossinello.
It's projection. I always listen sometimes to when people make claims like that. A lot of times they unknowingly project, and that to me is projection. Very clearly, actually, because China is a bully of its own people, and that's basically what Mosher is basically pointing out.
But and going back to Mao,
Absolutely.
Going back to Mao. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, basically, he points out, I think, some bullets. I just want to share a few of them with you because I think it's worth noting. He said, "I estimate that in all, some 80 million or more Chinese Mongols, Tibetans, Uyghurs have died at the hands of the biggest killing machine in human history.
That's a bold statement, Joe.
Well, that's a huge number, Joseph. I mean, that's a huge number. And the thing is about regimes like that, you just don't know really what's going on. I mean, that's the truth, because I mean, you think our news is skewed. I mean, like in places like that, like North Korea, Iran, China, you don't know what's really going on in those type of countries. But then he goes into a lot of detail about the one-child policy. He basically says the one-child policy was the longest running political campaign of the CCP and the most deadly. For 35 years, Chinese women were hunted down by the communist authorities if they were thought to have violated the party's imposed restrictions on childbearing. Those who resisted orders to abort an illegal child were arrested, dragged out of their homes to waiting vehicles, taken by force to the nearest abortion clinic. Mothers chose to give birth were basically forced.
If they were close to
birth, cesareans, forced cesareans, and illegal babies born alive were killed by injections. And doing research in Chinese towns, like Joe said, he was there in 1980. He was an eyewitness to these crimes. Speaking personally, I could remember in my own travels in India, I met a Chinese nationalist. Actually, she was going to become a nun. She was a young Chinese girl. She told me that you were taxed, because I asked her about it. She said that if you had more than one child, it was a financial penalty. So that's how she told me. She didn't go into this detail,
but it might have evolved into that. The stories that I've always heard was, I'm not doubting for a second that maybe because of some attention in the world to this brutal policy, okay, by what Mosher calls the biggest killing machine in human history. But I remember stories that were coming out basically saying what Mosher's saying in this article. They would take you out of your home, the woman, bring you to the hospital, force the birth of that child, and then kill that child. That's the enlightened regime that at Harvard and Yale, they say we need to recognize.
The thing is, you can't, like, it's been tried, like the Nazis tried to do it. You can't, like, configure human nature. Man, like, it just doesn't work. And now, because we covered this on another show, they don't have females in China.
Right, they now have moved to a 3-child policy.
Right, because
there's no women.
Correct. So I mean, like, you see, this is where, like, it's like almost like the natural law with regard to animals. If you go to like an ecosystem and you take out, I'm just going to make it up, you take out a snake. Well, the snake eats the frogs. And if you take out the snake, then the frogs run rampant, and then it just throws everything off. So, I mean, like, when man tries to, like, genetically maneuver through, like, a culture or a society, like I said, the Nazis tried to eliminate the Jews. It didn't work, and it wasn't going to work. This is the same type of stuff. It doesn't work. And this is another thing that Mosher talks about. He says that they've been around now, what is it, 100 years. They outlasted the communists, as in the Soviet Union. But even that, this isn't going to last. Communism is a failed system. They're going to cause havoc, and they have caused havoc. And frankly, this is the worst part of it. And people should pay attention.
But Joe, they're gonna cause havoc. Here's the sad part about it, and this is where Joe and I prove to you all on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. We're nonpartisan. We cover all the time. You got the Chamber of Commerce that's begging the Biden regime to let in foreign workers, normalize relations with China, do away with the tariffs that Trump imposed on them. So this brutal regime is allowed to be in business and be in power in large part due to the American Chamber of Commerce business interests and the left-wing whatever you want to call them, the hard left in America that are basically communist at their core. So they support the Chinese. That's why when you and I and all of us, and I saw Tom Gugliotta's out there. By the way, Tom Gugliotta, former NBA basketball player. Did you know that?
I know the name. Actually.
Yeah, Tom Gugliotta, former NBA player.
Oh, that's wild.
He loves the Frontline with Joe and Joe, and we love Tom Gugliotta.
That's fantastic.
Anyway, and Tom pointed out that we have to pray for Cardinal Zen. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the thing is, this regime is supported by America. business interests and hard leftists that want to gain that are interested in their one world government that need China because they factor so largely into that. Okay, we have to blame ourselves. We should be fighting against them in any. I'm not saying go to war. Okay, they do have nuclear weapons, but we should be like, no, we're not doing business with you. And so all American companies, that's it. You're done. Out of China. If you're not out of China, you don't sell one bottle of Coke. You don't sell one pair of Nikes. You don't sell one what do you call it? iPad.
Well, that's it.
Okay, iPhone. You're not selling anything in America. Not only are we not going to put tariff on you, we're going to ban your products. You want to do business in China? Go do business there. We don't support brutal regimes. What's so hard about that?
Well, money.
Because everybody, it's it, Joe. It all comes down to money.
It's money.
And then we're going to talk about a guy in a little while, all right, where you think it comes down to money. But we need to call out. See, Joe, it's one thing to call out the Chinese Communist Party, and we ought to. We need to call out Americans that support them.
You know, but the thing I find interesting is in any communist regime or even a socialist regime for that matter, the elites are wealthy. And that's the same thing that that Mosher kind of brings out about Xi Jinping. I mean, him and the rest of his inner circle, the oligarchs of that country, are wealthy. A friend of mine, 3 years ago, I was working with him. He went on a cruise and he went to Cuba. And he said that there's a part of the island where, you know, the leadership of Cuba lives. You're not allowed near it. It's absolutely isolated. It's blocked off. And he told me straight out, he said, the people live in absolute and utter poverty. And this is what they're trying to, it's a lighter version of it, obviously, but they're trying to create equality. That's what communism sells to people. Equality. If you go to parts of the world, like for instance, in Eastern India, whenever there's poverty, communism is there. West Bengal, which is basically Western, not Pakistan, Bangladesh, for like 50 years had a communist governor because they're poor. So basically, if you promise somebody a bag of rice and a bag of beans, they'll vote for you. And then they'll get rich. And it's the same thing.
But remember,
it repeats itself over and over again.
No,
Joe.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right. But remember, too, but these evil bastards, what they do is they create the conditions of poverty first. So then they can exploit that with the people that say, well, you know, you're poor. Yeah, but the capitalists didn't make you poor. And again, we're not defending the Chamber of Commerce types. But it wasn't a free market that made you poor. It was the brutal regime that made you poor. And then they tell you, well, you need to support us if you want to eat. That's what they do. And by the way, Joe, that's what they're trying to do in America. Make no mistake about it. That's what they do. Here they do it with debt. Ground you into dust with usurious compound interest. To sell you the idea, Joe, that you need to buy a home. Nothing wrong with buying a home. Do I have to pay $200,000 in interest on a $350,000 or $400,000 home over 30 years? In other words, it's debt, credit card debt. Got to buy a car, got to go into more debt. That's the way they do it here. There, they do it with raw government power. That's what they do there. But you're right.
But it's just like I said, I don't know how people don't see it. You're just selling yourself out for a crumb. I listened to Biden recently. He's talking about high-speed internet, and it reminded me of Obama when he was giving out cell phones. Do you remember that in like 2000? And it might have been like 2016. I
tried my best to ignore Obama, but I seem to remember something about that.
No, but it's just like you're just giving yourself, you're selling yourself for a crumb,
right?
You know what I'm saying? It's like they give you just a crumb and then they basically get themselves rich. And that's what happens in these regimes. Like I said, go back to Cuba once again. You know that the leadership of Cuba isn't living in poverty. You know that.
Right.
That's why they don't want anyone to see it, tourist or citizen alike. It's the same thing. I was not that I'm rich, because I'm not, but I worked very hard. And frankly, you know, like it's just the truth. So do my parents. But at least in America, you have a fighting chance. Not everyone is born into an elite circle. God knows my family wasn't. Not everyone is born with a super intellect that you're going to be able to create something off the hook from nothing. But at least in America, and I know tons of people like this. I'm telling you right now.
Let's take a break. We're going to come right back. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello on the Crusade Channel, always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com. Stick around. We got a great show for you today. Welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, way in the breach because we're talking about China on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. But that's my point, Joe, is that you get what's nauseating is that you get Americans, like we said, that support this. I don't understand why we let them get away with it. Like, think of it this way. What if you had faculty at Harvard and Yale? You had a faction of the history department, let's say, that said that they were self-identified Nazis. Any reasonable person would say, well, now you're out of a job. No, you can't teach in an American university if you're going to say that you're going to teach kids and you're a person that supports a brutal regime. Why do we allow it with the Chinese? Why did we allow it with the Soviet Union? When I grew up, I went to Seton Hall University. I had a professor that was an outright socialist, an economics professor. In other words, he would deny it, but he was an outright socialist. In other words, so like, I don't get it. Why do we allow them? We allow people, especially in academia and the media and other places, to say that we're supposed to what? Respect China? Am I supposed to respect?
Well, the business world respects China because they make a lot of money there. I mean, from banking to electronics to big tech. What's his face? Marbury. He was a basketball player in America. Mm-hmm. He went to China. His career was getting a little rocky over here. He made a fortune over there. A fortune. And in fact, he celebrated like he won championships. He made a fortune in China. The point is, there's a lot of money to be made, and people will gloss over a lot when money is in hand. I mean, we've seen that with the NBA. I mean, they clearly were not having it. Like when criticism was being directed towards the folks in the authorities in Hong Kong. They were basically beating the living snot out of people because Hong Kong has a different culture. It has more of a Western culture. It's not as much an Eastern culture. A lot of British influence. Frankly, there's a lot of American influence in Hong Kong. But I mean, people just gloss over things when they have money. I mean, it's just the way it is, period. They're willing to overlook it. You know what I'm saying?
No, Joe, I agree. Look, LeBron James said, "Oh, I understand that you have the right to free speech." This is what he said, Joe. Okay, this is terrible. LeBron James had the nerve to say, "Well, I understand you got the right to free speech, but you got to understand your free speech might affect other people." What? It might cost you a couple $1 million, LeBron, or a couple of your fellow athletes a couple $1 million. Uyghurs are dying. Uyghurs aren't our people. They're Muslim, okay? But they're being persecuted. They're being oppressed. They're being forced into slave labor. Okay, the Catholic Church is underground, okay, in China. We're going to talk about Cardinal Zen in a second, okay? And about what the Catholic Church is going through there. I don't care about your millions. I have the right to open my mouth. And I'm going to say China is a brutal dictatorship, a criminal enterprise, and the United States government shouldn't have anything to do with China until they change their ways. How about that, LeBron? And you have a choice. If I was dictator for a year, Joe Resinello, if I was dictator for a year, the left better watch their butt. I would tell LeBron, you either play basketball in America or you play basketball in China, but you don't play basketball in both places. Choice is yours. Make a decision. That's what I would do. But we have politicians, again, Joe, both sides of the aisle. They're both guilty. Both sides of the aisle, okay, that allow this. And it's disgusting. And I want to put a finer point on something, Joe, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you know there's a book called The Encyclopedia of War? Did you ever hear it? There's the Encyclopedia of War. Like anything you want to know about documented wars in human history, you go there. Do you know where the most brutal battles in human history? I'm talking about not Roman battles where 20 and 30,000 lives were lost. Okay, like when Hannibal defeated the Romans at Cannae. Okay, where let's say 30,000 Romans were killed. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in one battle. China, when the Chinese warlords were fighting against each other, in antiquity, those battles are documented. Those wars are documented. They are amongst the most brutal people, the powerful ones anyway. And that's the ones who are usually waging the wars. And they're still brutal. they're still brutal. And the smart ones are the ones that come here.
Well, let's talk about Jimmy Lai. Basically, Christopher Bedford in the Federalist wrote the story. He basically said he's a modern day martyr. Now, for those who don't know who Jimmy Lai is, he's a self-made millionaire, and he's willing to sacrifice everything and has sacrificed everything for his faith. He's an amazing person. I mean, just again, to give you a little bit more background, he's out of Hong Kong. He's now a Catholic. He wasn't always one. He met a woman. And basically she accompanied him into the church, and he heard the homilies of Cardinal Joseph Zen. This was in 1997. He was baptized into the church by that same man, Cardinal Zen. He is now retired. Lai is now in a prison cell in Hong Kong, and the communist dictatorship has once again seized one of his life's works, which was a newspaper. And this is what he had to say. It's pretty impressive. Again, this is a man that was a billionaire. He said, "No one can say we didn't fight. Prison life is the pinnacle of my life. I am completely at peace." And I want to just comment on that. And this is something, if you ask me, that cannot be rated, is peace. Peace. Christ says this very clearly in scripture. He says, the peace that I give you, you cannot get in the world. That is very true. I'm telling you this right now. That is very true. And that comes from confession. That comes from being at peace with yourself and being at peace with God. And there is no amount of money that can basically, if you ask me, replace that. And if you also, I mean, if I was to give advice to someone, follow your peace. Too many people don't do that. You will never be happy, truly happy, not ha-ha happy, happy, if you don't follow your peace. And to say this, prison life is the pinnacle of my life.
This is a billionaire.
I am completely at peace. That says so much. But I could even speak to myself. I mean, this past weekend, I went to confession. I felt very good. I had a burden on my back, and I got rid of it. And I'm going to tell you, you can't. And people say, "Oh, that's psychological." No, it's not. No, it's not. Don't tell me if I'm hungry and I eat a big meal and I'm full and you say, "Well, you're not full. That's psychological." No, I'm full. Well, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I'd like to emphasize to anyone who hears my voice, there's 96 people, in the chat room right now. All baptized Catholics, you're one confession away. You're one confession away, 15 minutes. I think of that all the time, Joe Pasillo. I mean, not to deviate from Jimmy Lai,
okay,
but I'm just saying peace. He says, "I am completely at peace." When you do what you're asked to do by God, I'm going to tell you right now, you have a state of mind that there are people that would pay billions of dollars for.
And you don't have to pay. That's what Joe's trying to say. You don't have to pay billions of dollars for it. But think of this. Think of this. Joe primarily says on the show all the time, and reminds us all that to whom much is given, much is expected. Jimmy Lai's a billionaire. The world says the last place he should be is in prison. In other words, he should be just going along with the Chinese regime, not have to go through oppression. Joe talked about grace. You cannot do what Mr. Lai is doing without grace. Impossible.
No, I would agree.
Impossible. This man must be in the sacraments.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be in a state of grace, because when you don't think $1 billion is a temptation?
Well,
real quick, Joe, do you think the loss of $1 billion? How
about prison?
And prison? Some people joke going to prison is not as bad as losing money, but not being in prison. All right. That's how much people are wedded to money. But my thing is, Jimmy Lai is a man who has to be in a state of grace to go through what he's going. Joe described that he's in prison. He's completely at peace. And he's saying prison is the pinnacle of my life. And this is a billionaire newspaper man who the Chinese government has shut down. I am in awe of this man. And when I saw Christopher Bedford's article, I was like, we have to talk about this, because you want to know what? The American leftists want me to take a page from, let's say, foreign communists, whether they be Russian, whether they be Chinese. No. I'm not going to, what? Xi Jinping is supposed to be my hero? No, Jimmy Lai is my hero. He's the hero of the moment as far as I'm concerned, okay? Because he's standing up for the truth, and he's ready to die, Joe.
It's almost
he's
like,
ready to die.
It's almost like Thomas Becket.
Yes.
very similar to Thomas Becket. I mean, he was a very, very influential man, wealthy. And, you know, Henry VIII took everything, including his life. He took all his lands too. And he had a big family. And his one daughter begged him to sign the oath.
Right.
And he wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't do it.
So my point is, it's very hard to do this type of thing. As Joe said, I couldn't agree with him more. The only way one could do that is if you live a very prayerful life. There, you know, I mean, think about St. Peter. St. Peter saw the miracles of Christ. He went up the mountain and saw the transfiguration of Jesus Christ, and he still ran away. So, I mean, that just gives you some insight into human nature. I mean, like, he saw miracles. He watched Christ transfigure, and he ran away like a 5-year-old girl. So my point is, there's no way when, you know, the chips are down, you're going to do this on your own will or your own strength. He clearly is a person who has met the Lord. And here's another thing, you know, he's one of many, actually it's tens and hundreds of thousands of people. If you read the annals of saints and people who changed their life radically. I mean, that it's sort of like in the gospel when the three kings, I think it's very like symbolic of when they meet Christ, and then it says in scripture, and then they went home another way. You see, that's when you know that you've encountered the Lord. It's not like if your life hasn't changed as a result, and that's where the term born again, well, there's even that term like to a degree within the Catholic faith. That's why a lot of religious Catholics, when I mean religious, they become monks or they change their name. That's why when a pope becomes a pope, he changes his name. He's a new creation. When you go to heaven, you're supposedly going to get another name that God is going to give to you specifically. Why? Because you're a new creation.
You're a new creation. And yeah, we can't have it. I like the way Jimmy Lai likens, see, because remember something. I know a lot of atheists like to say that, well, communism is kind of a religion, so we don't agree with them. Yes, you do, because just because you could point to certain religious aspects of, let's say, a communist regime, Soviet Union, the Chinese Communist Party, Castro. There is a religious quality, but it's an ape of religion. It's not authentic religion in any meaningful sense. So Jimmy Lai makes a good point. He says they have initiation into the party, Joe Resinello. It's kind of a baptism. This is Jimmy Lai. They have self-criticism as a kind of, it's a confession of sins. Okay. Re-education. We've covered that on the show, the Khmer Rouge and what they did as far as re-education is a kind of penance, and elevation to hero of the party as a kind of sainthood. And of course, at least Mao has a kind of everlasting life as a photo hanging in Tiananmen Square, smiling as an embalmed corpse is in a casket in the square. This is not religious. This is supplanting God with the religion of the state.
Well, that's what socialism does.
That's what it does. That's what it does. And Jimmy Lai's pointing it out. And he's willing, again, I'm completely amazed by this guy because he's willing to completely lay down everything. I think Americans should really take a good, long look at Jimmy Lai and what it means, because Americans, remember, Joe, everybody in America is Christian. We're all supposed to be Christian. Are you living a Christian life? I don't know that I could do what Jimmy Lai did. I'm not going to lie.
But with grace, you could do anything.
With grace, you can.
You could do anything.
But I'm tired of hearing if you're a Christian, but you're going to do business with China. Okay? And it's such a web, too. You don't even know, Joe Resinello, when you're buying stuff from China. That's the worst part about it, because if you knew, you'd probably say, nah, I'm not going to buy that. My point is that we need to start acting like Christians. That includes Protestants and liberal Catholics. Stop making excuses for brutal regimes like the Chinese Communist Party. Stop, okay? Because we're tired of it. Jimmy Lai is an example of someone who truly is bearing witness to Christ, okay? And he's going to wind up being a martyr, Joe.
Well, he's a saint. And he's suffering. I mean, we're not, there's a term, detachment. you know, as a Christian, particularly a Catholic, you shouldn't be really attached to anything. This world is transitory. I mean, the older I get, particularly with the passing of my father, recently, I watched him, you know, deteriorate over a 2-year period. He was a very healthy person till he was 75, extremely healthy, actually. So my point is, you know, we're here and we're gone. It's just the way it is. I mean, like, even if like you live to be 100, we're here and we're gone. A friend of mine recently reached out to me and told me next year is my 30th year out of college. They were talking about getting together. I remember walking out of college like it was yesterday. I'm not even kidding. 30 years has gone by. In 30 more years, I'll be 81 if I'm even here. You see, we lose focus on that. You see, that's one thing when you're close to God. I mean, like, you know, everything passes through. That doesn't mean, listen, you lose all your money, you lose your health. It's, you know, it's, you know, you're not going to just say, oh, okay, I lost that. But my point is, our treasure isn't here. And I'll be honest with you, you don't just acquire that mentality. That comes by living that mentality when you have your health, when you have your treasure. You know, I've watched holy people die as well, particularly nuns, and they don't mourn. And I remember talking to a nun, this is a missionary of charity, saying like when a sister dies, she said to me very seriously, she said, Joe, when one dies and they live a holy life, it's like going from one room to the next, passing from the living room into the kitchen, taking a step. It's an easy transition.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're not walking, that's a hard transition because you're not thinking like that. You're not living like that. You have to live the life. And this guy, what he accomplished by basically to give up, you know, $1 billion. Do you know how easy it would have been for him to just kowtow to that? You know,
absolutely.
Very easy. And people do that all the time. I mean, I've seen people in my own profession basically sell their soul for a lot less than $1 billion.
Joe, we say on the show all the time, we have a hard time canceling our HBO subscription when they insult us as Christians, or Netflix when they insult us as Christians. This guy's going to die in prison, or they're going to put a bullet in his head, one or the other, lose $1 billion in the process. And we don't want to stop using Gillette because they've gotten woke. Oh, I like their razors. I like their razors too, but I found something different. My point is, we don't want to give up anything in America. And we need to start shaming people a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit what we need to do. I need to be shamed. In other words, to start looking at things more a little bit closely, where we're buying stuff, be better stewards of our money, stop buying from Amazon, all these little things. But all of that, at the end of the day, Joe Resinello, all of that is I don't care if you give up all of it. You're still sacrificing only a drop, a fraction of a percent of what Jimmy Lai is sacrificing. Well, because he's going to die. That brutal regime is going to kill him. And the disgusting part about it, Joe, is that the American left and the American media and academia, they won't say an effing word. They will not say an effing word about it. But see, if he was a leftist, you see how fast they turn him into one of their martyrs.
Well, you talk about like history. I mean, and again, this is a gentleman, I think, and a great witness to the faith. I mean, I see Colin in the chat room. He comes, he always watches our show. He's in Ireland. A friend of mine wrote a book about from Derry. It's called something of St. Columns. It's a boys' school in Ireland, and basically it's produced 2 Nobel Prize winning alumnists. And Seamus, what's his name? O'Heen. He's a poet and also guy won the Nobel Peace Prize. I can't believe I can think his name. But the whole point of the matter is, during those times when England was basically persecuting Ireland, you couldn't get a job in Derry, in Northern Ireland. You could not get a job.
Mm-hmm.
If you were Catholic. Think about this. And this is, I mean, things are tough in America. And I just draw that parallel with Ireland. I mean, would you be willing to not be able to work? I mean, you have kids. I mean, like, people have kids. You can't get a job. I mean, like, that is no joke.
Yeah.
And people did it, is my point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are very, very blessed. As crazy as it can get in America, it's not gotten to that point. But this is a guy, like, you can't even like, the thing I find interesting about him, he was born poor and he made a lot of money. It maybe could make that transition back a little bit easier. But at the same time, to give up that type of lifestyle, to go to prison and basically to die. I mean, like Joe said, he may not die tomorrow, but he's going down that road. I mean, cannot be like said enough, if you ask me. And be honest with you, it's beyond human strength. It's beyond human strength.
Well, look, like you said earlier, in other words, we all could fall very, very quickly. We need the grace. Obviously, Jimmy Lai has it. What Jimmy Lai needs more of right now is our prayers. Offer up your next rosary for him, for argument's sake. Have a mass said for him. Do something for the guy, because you want to know something? I, as a Roman Catholic man, okay, when I think that I'm doing okay in my Catholic faith and trying to live out my faith, I look at a guy like this and I say, I got a long way to go. I got a long way to go. Because I don't know if I'd give up $1 billion. I pray to God I would, okay? But this guy needs our prayers. And the Chinese Communist government needs to come down. It needs to come down, and the West better start putting pressure on them. And people in the West, citizens, need to start replacing the leadership that coddles the Chinese Communist Party with people that are going to fight the Chinese Communist Party, like Trump did. Did that get us taken down, Joe, of social media? I don't know. Okay, like Trump did. And call them out for what they are. They are a brutal, murderous communist dictatorship. That's what they are. They are part of what we've said on this show is communism, international communism, which is a criminal enterprise. That's all it is. That's why, as Joe mentioned earlier, that's why you get rich when you're a communist leader. I use the word loosely. Leader. Okay, whether you're Castro, whether you're Stalin, who died in his deathbed, whether you're Mao, that's why you get rich and everybody else stays poor. That's why you became a communist to begin with, because you wanted to get rich.
It's power too.
All right, rich with money, rich with power. Let's stop with communism. Let's throw communism on the dustbin of human history. How about that?
I still can't believe it's being tried, especially after the Soviet Union.
Because nobody calls them out on it. Nobody walks into the colleges and fires these professors that are teaching it. Nobody turns around. You need to create a stigma for those who say they believe in communism in America the same way you would do for anyone who says they believe in Nazism. There needs to be a stigma. You need to shun those people. You need to stay away from those people.
What it is, I'm convinced of it. The academia, who prescribe to this, I'm convinced of it. These are men and women who are very, very bright. If you ask me, a lot of them can't make money in the private sector. I actually think it's a jealousy thing. They'll never admit to that, but I think that they look at sometimes people who are in the private sector and they say to themselves, I am 55 times smarter than this person, yet they could buy and sell me 4 or 5 times over. And that is what drives them into this mindset. I'm convinced of it.
I am not going to disagree.
Like, I mean, that's just my insight into them, because they're smart enough to know that it's a failed system. Like, if you're smart enough to teach at Harvard, you know that it hasn't worked.
Well, you know, just based on the numbers, 80 million people and going strong, evidently, in China. And those same professors that would say, oh, the Holocaust, the Nazis killed 9 million people, 6 million Jews and 3 million others. In other words, the communists in China make Hitler look like a piker in the killing department. Okay? These guys even surpassed Stalin. So give me a break. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, and now we're angry. But we're prayerful. We're praying for Jimmy Lai. You're on the Crusade Channel, always on air, always online, at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room's open, crusadechannel.com/chat. Follow Joe and I on all social media, wherever you find us. Click something that's going to help us. It's all we can ask you. And we have Patreon, patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe, if you want to kick in a couple bucks and support us financially. Stick around. We got a lot more. Welcome back, everyone, to the Front Line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And yeah, when you're talking about China, as we did in the first segment, you're really in the breach. You're really in the breach. And you want to know what? I blame Americans. I blame it. That regime would not have the type of power that they have okay, if it wasn't for Americans, business interests and political interests that coddle these murderers, and it really needs to come to an end. So from something that's angering to something that we feel is somewhat hopeful, I think, Joe Rossinello.
Absolutely.
I think it's somewhat hopeful. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and bring it back to America. We're going to bring it back to America.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court, a couple cases, and then we can make some general comments because there's been a lot going on in the Supreme Court as of late.
Real quick, we got a comment that I want to comment on. Okay, Joe Rossinello, if it's okay. Our man Colin, he's out in Ireland. Okay, makes a good point. Jerry, you ever hear of Ravi Zacharias? He's a Protestant apologist.
No,
okay,
I haven't
very
actually.
very effective guy. He didn't agree. He was anti-Catholic. To a degree. He died recently. God rest his soul. Very smart guy, though. Very, very smart guy. And he told the story. He used to tell the story because he did a very good job. I wish Catholics would do this type of job of arguing and debating atheists. Okay. So he was talking about Stalin. So Colin brought it up. This is an example of what we're talking about. I think it's a great example. Okay. Stalin was on his deathbed. This is according to Svetlana, his daughter. Okay. That Stalin on his deathbed. Now think about it. This guy who killed millions dies in a bed. That's the first thing to notice. Before he died, he looked up. He raised his fist in the air. And then he dropped his hand. His head fell back and he died. Stalin was not an atheist. Stalin and the rest of these characters, they hate God. Stalin proved it on his deathbed. Why would he raise his fist in the air? He's raising his fist to God because, like the devil himself, he can't beat God. And at that moment, he knew it before he went to hell. So having said that, Joe, Colin brought that up. And that was the testimony of Svetlana, by the way, his daughter, who was in the room. He died after having raised his fist in indignation towards God.
Was he a Catholic?
Who?
Stalin.
Stalin was
baptized.
I don't know if he was Russian Orthodox or Catholic. He did get rejected from the seminary. He was in seminary, and he got rejected from the seminary, which a lot of people say could have fostered this resentment towards organized religion. He originally was going into the seminary.
Well, hopefully, I just read a book on divine mercy because God knows I need mercy. What's it called? They say that the Lord calls to every soul 3 times at the hour of death. So maybe as the fist went down, maybe God reached out to him. Maybe he reached a hand to him. Because, by the way, if we don't reach a hand to God, that's where we're going, people. That's where we're going. There's only one way out. There's only one way out. You see, this is sadly, I mean, just to digress for a little bit, people don't sometimes focus on that. Christ says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to me except through the Father. Too many times people say there's other ways, there's this, that, and the other thing. Listen, Jesus, none of us deserve heaven. Not a single solitary one of us. God makes it available. And frankly, if you ask me, that's the lifeboat, and we should all get on it. In plain English. And it baffles me. Like you talk about raising your fist to God. I mean, anyone who's lived a life for a while as an adult, you realize, I mean, not for nothing, you don't have God in your life. It's not that it's a crutch. It's just, if you ask me, it's just reality. It's just reality,
right.
Joe Pasillo. We were made by God, for God, to love him, serve him, and be with him in all eternity. That sums it all up.
Right, Joe, but you got to remember something. I mean, when you think, and I think about this all the time, because obviously Joe and I say on the show all the time, and I'm not ashamed to say, I'm working out my salvation in fear and trembling. Sorry, our Protestant brothers and sisters, you can lose your soul, even after having accepted Christ. And as St. Paul said, okay, I work out my salvation in fear and trembling. But the bottom line is, I think about it, Joe, every day. Okay. Free will is a powerful, powerful thing. That's why the atheists try to deny sometimes that we have free will. But leaving that aside, free will, you have a will and it's free. You could choose God, or you, as Satan did, could say, I will not serve. And that is a powerful, powerful thing. And it's a gift. Free will is a gift. You cannot have love without free will.
That's the key.
Okay? You have to make a choice. Do we do it perfectly? No. That's why we have confession, because even the Lord knew we weren't going to do it perfectly. But to constantly reach out towards him, okay, in an act of your own will to say, Lord, you are you, I am me, and I am not you. I need you. Okay. That act of humility, that act of the will, that's what we have. And Joe, let me tell you something. I've got to break it to you. Okay. Even in that moment, and I agree with you, I've read that before, and I hope to God that that's exactly what he does. Joe, there'd still be plenty of people that will slap his hand away.
Well, the
there
thing
still
is,
would, because of free will.
But it's also the grace to identify that hand. You see, you live a lot of times, you die like you live. That's the truth. I mean, like, you have to identify it. How many people don't see? A lot of people, a lot smarter than Joe and I, don't see because they don't want to see. I mean, like this is, you know, we talked about China. People just gloss over things. We've had many, many interviews, Joe and I, in the Catholic world, a lot of times converts. And recently we interviewed a gentleman that's involved in the St. Paul Center out of Steubenville, Ohio, and he was a convert. A lot of converts out of there because Scott Hahn is a convert. We've interviewed Scott as well. And he said he came from a very fundamental, Corazine.
John. Oh, yeah, John, Rob Corsi.
Yeah. So he's involved at St. Paul Center in Steubenville. And frankly, you know, he told me, I found that I had to ask him on it. He's like, I came from a very fundamental Baptist background. We took the Bible literally. And I said, Rob, you take the Bible literally. How did you get around if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life within me?
Right.
How do you get around upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld will not prevail against it? How do you get around these things?
Right.
But you do. And Rob's infinitely smarter than I am. Infinitely. So my point is, human beings, it has everything to do with the will. You see, it's the will.
But I would say this though, and this is one thing where we try to have a little bit of balance or try to understand, because you know, again, if you're faithful and you contemplate these things, the scales don't just appear on your eyes; they grow over time. Okay, they didn't just miraculously appear on your eyes to the point where you can't see, like St. Paul, and you need divine intervention to take it off. Every time we turn away from God and then we don't acknowledge that in confession, those scales get thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, to the point, Joe, there is no transparency. You can't see the light anymore, even a dim one, through those scales. And that's what I think happens with a lot of people. That's why I think on their deathbed, a lot of the times, again, God has to respect your free will because he gave you that gift. And if you slap his hand away, hell is where you're going. Hell is where you're going.
And also,
it's a shame.
And also keep this in mind, because I'm going to, you know, speak it from a theological perspective. I'm not going to say it in a crude way, but sin dims the intellect. This is a fact. It dims the intellect. Do you know that Joan of Arc was questioned for days by bishops, and she never spoke a heresy? I read a book about Joan of Arc. She never spoke a heresy. She was questioned by people and she was illiterate. It dims the intellect, sin. This is a fact. I'm telling you this right now. That's why people don't see certain things, particularly around abortion, things that are so clear. And frankly, that's why, I'll be honest with you, why I think our show has had success. We always say we have PhDs in common sense, because common sense is not that common anymore. Many of the things we say, if you ask me, it's just straight up and down common sense. We just have, frankly, the guts enough to say it.
Right.
That's it.
We have more guts than all the people out there that are running corporations that have millions of dollars, or high-priced basketball players. We don't have more nerve than they do.
I mean, it's just
we lose our job. You know what? It hurts. LeBron loses his. He's got millions.
But I'll be honest with you, even with the job thing, and I've learned this with my own walk with Christ, I'll get another one.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll be honest with you. I'm not like if you trust God, I've learned this in my own walk with God, he will always provide for you. That doesn't mean you're going to be rich. That doesn't mean, like, we had a great interview with Albino Aragno, with the Chinaclo community. They live on Providence. We've also had another good interview, which is going to be coming out on Veritas, with John Pridmore. He lives on Providence too. You talk to people that live on Providence. He says, listen, if we don't have sugar, then I don't drink my coffee with sugar. You just accept it. The point is, God will always provide. We just don't believe it. We don't believe it. People say that, like, with families that have big kids, like a lot of kids. They'll say like, how are you going to send your kids to school? My answer is, I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know, but I trust God. And you know, you'd be surprised how things work out in life. God, Mother Teresa used to say, God has a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? And if you trust God, especially if you do what he asks of you, you see, we're always calculating. See, Jimmy Lai, he's not calculating. He trusts God. It comes right down to that. He said, take my money. Fine. I trust you. You'll provide for me.
His calculation is, I'm going to die. All right. And I want to go to heaven.
But that should be our calculation. I mean, like all people, this life, again, it goes by, like I said, I'll be 51 in a couple of weeks. It goes by pretty fast.
Somebody asked in the chat room, said, who's better? I hate to use that word, but who's better, Thomas Becket or Thomas More? Neither, both. They're equal. They're saints. Okay. They both stood up against unjust authority. Thomas Becket stood up against Henry II, and Thomas More stood up against Henry VIII. Okay. I mean, it's that simple. And these were men who, with position, influence, wealth, and had it all taken away. All right. Somebody said we're confusing the two. No, we're not. We know exactly who we're talking about. Thomas More and Thomas Becket. Okay. Both of whom were martyrs. Both of them. That's why they're both saints. All right. So let's move on. Let's get into America. All right. So we got a little glimmer. Joe Rossinello. Let's call it a little glimmer of hope from the Supreme Court. Go ahead. I'm gonna let you lead us into it.
We're gonna talk. Hannah Blue basically breaks down what happened in Arizona, particularly around the decision upholding the state statute banning ballot harvesting as and it's a massive victory for election integrity. Basically, Dr. Kelly Ward, she's the chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, said in a statement following the decision upholding the Grand Canyon State, obviously that's Arizona's, ban on ballot harvesting. For those who don't know what ballot harvesting is, it's a practice that allows third parties to collect and deliver ballots. Let me just stop right there. I can't even believe that we would even entertain such a practice. That would be like going into a nursing home that had 300 people, going to every door and being like, why don't you just fill this out? By the way, let me just help you.
Right. Well, that's what they do.
But I'm just saying that I can't even believe that's entertaining. No,
but a bunch of little Jill, no, not for nothing. I mean, it'd be like watching a scene right out of hell. They're like a bunch of little demons. They get out there, they go into the district, all right, and they try to target people who they think that they can manipulate into helping them fill out their ballot. I mean,
it's just like even for like an 8th grade, the president of the 8th grade. Listen, it's very simple. I'm going to be truthful with you. Once again, I'm going to give you a little common sense here. Everyone in America who is of age can vote. It's a fact.
Right.
Here's the deal. You got to get a picture ID. You got to show that you live in the district. That's also what was going on here. They were saying that you could vote out of district. No, it doesn't work that way.
No, if you're not in the district, you don't vote.
And here's the thing. Again, common sense control. Okay, common sense control. You got to be 18. You have to have a valid identification. If you don't drive, you can get an identification, a non-driving identification. It works that way, whether you're in Mississippi or you're in Massachusetts. You got to show that you live in the district. You got to show up and vote.
See, Joe, what Joe is doing right now on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. What Joe is doing right now is completely valid. He's explaining very in a common sense way, what should be done. You need an ID. You have to live in the district. Here's the other Joe's response. Having agreed with Joe and what he said, okay, we're not letting you cheat. That's what you're supposed to do to fat Stacey Abrams, okay? That's what you're supposed to do to her. We're not letting you cheat. Call me a racist. I don't care. We're not letting you cheat. You are a lying Democrat, okay? We know you want to cheat. You know that you use ballot harvesting and other things to be able to cheat effectively. And then when we catch you and we stop you, then you want to say, you're a racist. No, you're a lying cheat, and we're not letting you do it. And the Supreme Court just said, not only Joe, by the way, and I apologize, everybody out there, Crusade Channel, I shouldn't call Stacey Abrams fat. I have to now go to confession for that. And I'm being serious. I shouldn't do that. Having said that, though, somebody's got to get in her face at people like her and say, no, we're not letting you cheat. I don't have to make an argument. Now, Joe's argument's perfect. Perfect. All right. No question about it. But I'm not there. I'm not there. I'm there in their face saying, you're not cheating. Or as they say in Newark, you ain't cheating. I ain't letting you.
Well, this is what Alito had to say. Because
Spot on, by the way.
He wrote the majority opinion. He said the court holds that Arizona's out-of-precinct policy and its ban on ballot harvesting do not violate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and the ban on ballot harvesting was not enacted with a racially discriminatory purpose.
That was important for him to say.
And to be honest with you, again, I can't even believe whether you're a Republican or Democrat, you would even propose ballot harvesting. And again, you have to vote in your district. Now, what it comes down to, and this is, in my view, the fundamental problem with the radical left, it's the word authority. They cannot live with any boundaries. Listen, there are rules to life. For instance, you can't go outside your house and defecate in the sidewalk. Why?
Unless you live in San Francisco.
You can't do that. Because why? If you do that, disease breeds, right? So we have to go to the bathroom in a structure, which is called a toilet, and you flush the toilet. Why? For sanitary purposes. Why? Because it keeps society safe. They can't live with any boundaries. This, to me, is common sense. And here's the nefarious part about it, is how the press says that it's racist. No, it's not.
No,
it's not. And I'm so glad the Supreme Court said it. It's not racist.
That's what Alito said. That's basically what he said. He goes, there's nothing discriminatory here. Nothing whatsoever. You can't ballot harvest. If you're a third party, keep your filthy, grubby leftist hands off that ballot.
And that goes for the Republicans too. You can't ballot harvest. You can't. It doesn't work that way. You have to listen to me. I want everyone in America to vote. You know that it's a shame that not every single person who's over 18 doesn't vote. Do you know that if you're a Catholic, it's obligatory? It's actually a civic duty. Do you know Padre Pio used to vote? He used to vote. It's obligatory. You have to vote.
Even if you vote for right in yourself.
That's my point.
Yourself.
And that was always my thing where people, to digress, Catholics who didn't vote for Trump, how, I don't know, frankly, particularly on the abortion issue. If you hated him that much, write someone in. But vote. Show up and write in your wife. I'm just saying.
I'd vote for my wife.
I'm just saying, write someone in. Right. But my point is, you got to vote. And this is common sense stuff. It's sad that there were 3 justices that actually voted for it, which I think is pathetic.
I know. And
it is pathetic.
I'm really surprised. I mean, again, we're all told that the left, they're so smart. They're so educated. Well, what part of the fact that the state legislature has the right, has the authority to make election law, and just because a bunch of loony lefties say it's racist doesn't make it racist.
Do you know?
And that's why I'm glad Alito brought race into it and said there is no disparate racial impact.
No, and Kagan wrote 41 pages on this. I mean, I'll be truthful with you. I don't see it.
She's a hack.
Listen, not for nothing, you're a lot smarter than me. This to me is common sense stuff. Listen, you have, once again, in this country, if you're 18 years old, whether you're in Hawaii or you're in Maine, you can vote. But here's the deal. You need an ID. You got to show where you live, and you got to show up. And election day is one day.
That's right. Not a month. We got to take
one
a break.
day.
We have to take a break. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We are obviously way in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room is open at crusadechannel.com/chat. Follow Joe and I all over social media. If you want to invest a couple bucks in us and our future success, patreon.com/the frontline with Joe and Joe. And please download the Veritas Catholic Radio Network mobile app so that you can hear Joe and I and a bunch of other great content, both original and EWTN content on there at veritascatholicnetwork.com. And I forgot to mention earlier, but I'll mention it now. please go to Crusade Channel, hit listen free, and take advantage of the free trial subscription. So because we're doing a subscriber push, because we're firmly convinced that at the end, you're going to want to be a subscriber to Mike Church and the whole lineup down there at the Crusade Channel. You're with the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Joe, I just wanted to put a finer point before we move on, because I think it's important. Sam Alito, by the way, not just because he's a Paisan, okay?
Even though Jersey,
he's from Jersey, he's a Paisan. You think we like him? Yes, okay? He did say this, and I thought it's very important, okay? Because he's saying it from the bench, but Joe and I might say it a different way here. He said, quote, even if the plaintiff has shown a disparate burden caused by HB 2023, that's the Arizona law, the state's justification would suffice to avoid Section 2 liability, he wrote. A state, now this is the part that Kagan and Sotomayor and Breyer need to get through their head if you actually want to read what the Constitution says. A state indisputably has a compelling interest in preserving the integrity of its election process. You see what I mean? And what Joe's trying to say? Common
It's a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer.
And they're mad because, again, Joe, we are not letting them cheat again.
Well, let's talk again. This came out of the Supreme Court. Then there were some other things. I want to make some general comments after we get through this with this story. Catherine Hamilton reported that the Supreme Court sided with the Americans for a Prosperity Foundation, that's the AFP, against acting California Attorney General Matthew Rodriguez in favor of keeping nonprofit donor records private, smacking down a measure pushed by Vice President Harris that conservatives feared could be used to target them. And again, this was a 6-3 decision. Let me just break it down. Basically, what they want to do is donor lists, make them public. So let me just say this. So say you supported, I don't know.
Well, use a real. Just give you a real life example. Brandon Ike, Catholic, founder of Mozilla, gave $1,000 to defeat gay marriage in California. He got doxxed. He lost his job as the founder of the company. There's a real life example.
Well, it was a 6-3 decision. This is what Roberts wrote. He said, protected associations furthers a wide variety of political, social, and economic, education, religious, and cultural ends, and is especially important in preserving political and cultural diversity and in shielding dissent expressed by the majority. Now, again, this is common sense. Here's another thing. You know that they're going to use this against you to try to basically cancel you. You know it. So why would you go along with this?
Right.
Like, to me, this is such a no-brainer once again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a no-brainer. And this also, keep in mind, because we've covered a number of things, Supreme Court doesn't get it right all the time. They're never going to. Their ideas stink. The left, Joe Biden's regime, expect more of this. And this is the comments that I wanted to allude to. Robert George had some interesting Facebook commentary this week regarding they're still beating up the Supreme Court rejected the cake guy.
Yeah. I heard about that.
And there was also another case earlier on last week. I believe, I forget what state, it was a transgender situation that the Supreme Court basically refused to take it.
Roberts is a trip. I'm sorry.
It is. I mean, he's an institutional man. He came from Bush. It's par for the course. But this is the comment that I want to make about that. Basically, I don't sweat that either. And I'm going to tell you why. Because all he's doing is kicking the can down the line. It's going to bubble back up. It's like I've seen men like this operate in the corporate world. They kick the can down the line, but ultimately things come to roost, and they will. And I think also the reason why the court doesn't take this, obviously because it's going to make waves, they think it may lose. And they don't want to have their hand in that mess. And that was another thing that they recently did, obviously in November. Clarence Thomas had some very strong words about it. It was in Pennsylvania to basically extend accepting absentee ballots 3 days after the deadline.
Right.
And the court refused to weigh in. So here's the deal. That's your job. Obviously, you're doing a disgraceful job when you kick the can down the line, but I still don't worry about it. And I'm going to tell you once again why. It will bubble back up. These ideas stink. And I'm going to tell you right now, many of them, you don't even have to go to law school to adjudicate them. You don't even have to go to law school to adjudicate them. And eventually, they're going to come right up, particularly what we're going to see soon. And I'm amazed that they took it, what's going on in Mississippi. I'm going to pay very, very close attention to that regarding the 15-week ban on abortion. I actually think, Joe, I'm going to be truthful with you. I actually think they're going to get it.
Well,
Honest to goodness, yeah. I actually think it's going to get by.
That would effectively overturn Roe versus Wade.
Well, it would influence it, and it would influence the abortion industry. But I actually think because science, and it's the same thing about the transgender situation. I don't sweat that either, and I'm going to tell you why. Because eventually there will be an assault in a bathroom. And a smart parent like Nick Salmon's father and mother, I give them a lot of credit. You sue them. And basically what you say is, I don't care what your child identifies as. Science says he's not a girl, he's a boy, and he has no business in that bathroom.
And remember something, these school districts are not CNN or Washington Post that can afford a few $1 million.
Correct.
They will change.
And that's
they get sued and they lose.
And that's exactly what you do as the parent. You basically say, listen, the DNA of that child is not a girl. It's a boy. I don't care what type of puberty blockers you threw into that child. I don't care what type of surgery that child had. He is who he is because science says so. They sue, they win. Then it'll go to the Supreme Court. All Roberts is doing is what's it called, delaying the inevitable.
Do you think I was reading the stories during the week and thinking about a few things. Do you think Roberts is and the quote unquote conservatives with the couple that we mentioned, like the Arizona case, that strikes me as throwing a couple crumbs. You know what I mean, Joe? Like, all right, I know like Roberts, like I know I screwed up. I should have heard the Pennsylvania case. We didn't hear it. Let's give the conservatives what could amount to a victory for them. Won't be too controversial because not too many people are in favor of ballot harvesting. So they throw us a crumb. You know what I mean? But then you refuse to hear Jack Baker's case. Or Jack Phillips' case. Or you're not going to weigh in on this transgender nonsense. Then what the F is your job?
Well,
would be my question. If you're not going to hear these cases and adjudicate these cases, then why are you there?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, you don't take that job to look fancy in robes, but listen, I'm used to it because I work in the corporate arena and I see that's how people preserve themselves. They avoid those conflicts. They don't want that's just how it works.
Right.
People of power, the whole idea when they say the buck stops here.
Yeah.
That is garbage.
That's when you know somebody's full of crap.
Right. I mean, that's garbage. And to be honest with you, the best of them, not only doesn't the buck stop there, they blame it on someone else. I mean, I've seen people layer themselves. They're so layered basically to blame somebody else. When something happens, it's the person under them. They're just layered. They're untouchable. I mean, that's how power works. It doesn't shock me, by the way. But what I have also seen in that arena is things come to roost and it will come back around. And when it does, if you ask me, it's a no-brainer.
Joe Resinello, I'm not one of those people, okay? I'm not one of those people that worships the Constitution, okay? But it is a damn fine document, if you ask me. What you just described, though, is what our Constitution
it's a check and
addresses. Power. There is an amount. See, the Constitution is almost mathematical about it. There's an amount of power that's going to be amassed, and that power has to be distributed, decentralized. There are certain things that those who hold that power cannot do. There's things that they're obligated to do. Okay. And the Constitution spells it out very clearly. Like you said earlier about Jack Phillips. Okay. An 8-year-old could read the part where it says, Congress shall not pass any law that prohibits the free exercise of religion. What's Jack Phillips doing? He says, I'm not going to do something that violates my conscience, my religious beliefs. Okay, Constitution protects you. Next case, Yeah, but he's discriminating. He doesn't want to do it. You can't force him to do it. You can't force him to conform his views to your lifestyle. He's not denying you service. He's saying you could buy the cake, okay? But he's just not going to put 2 men on it or 2 women. What's the problem?
And here's the thing. Have the courts made mistakes? Of course they have.
Look at Dred Scott.
I was just going to say that. But my point being, what happened to it eventually? You see, sadly, judges are influenced by the culture too. And the court, they have done many things, particularly abortion. Clearly, it's wrong. That's going to end too. It's not going to end by the courts, though, by the way. God's going to end that. That's my own theory. And I've said that many times on many shows. However, eventually, bullcrap is identified as bullcrap. And just like segregation was bullcrap, the court, that was perfectly legal. My grandfather, who was in the Marine Corps, used to tell my mother, he said that when he was in the South, he always hated how blacks were treated in the military. Now, he was in World War II. He used to say they couldn't eat where we ate, and they trained together. They fought together. It's the way it was.
Right.
So my point is, and we all know that that is crap, and that should never have happened, but it did, and it was supported by the law. And it disappeared eventually. It's the same thing.
Right.
It may happen for a while, but eventually crap is identified as crap and it goes away.
Yeah.
And it will go away. I have absolutely no doubt. And that's why this regime, I'll be honest with you, I was very, very, very afraid at first especially when the Georgia Senate piece, like those two,
who, the Warlock?
When the Warlock and that other gentleman, I forget his name.
You know what? He's so Ossoff. He's so irrelevant. He could go in Ossoff as far as
no.
I'm
But
concerned.
my point is, and they still can't get anything done.
No.
And this is what I'm saying. Listen, God's going to use this time to purify the country. I said this just today, coming back, like from church. It's going to be a couple lost generations. I hate to say it, but it's true.
Well, we've already lost a couple generations.
But
hopefully,
but at least even when I was a kid, the family was still intact to a degree. I mean, there was a code among men, even men. Like I had neighbors that didn't go to church, but they were married 60 years. I could think of a number of them, actually. And it's not that they lived the most virtuous lives, not for nothing, but there was a code among men, at least the ones that I knew growing up. You didn't get divorced. You didn't leave your wife. You didn't leave your kids.
Right.
That's not there anymore. It really isn't. And that's not just for the poor. It's for the rich, the poor, the smart, and the simple. And frankly, as a result, we're going to have a few lost generations. But I am utterly convinced, because it's happened in the past in societies, from the ashes, another society will blossom. And if you ask me, the Catholic Church will be at the forefront of it, as it has in the past and will again.
Well,
there's no doubt in my mind.
No doubt that at some point in the future, this country is going to really go one of two ways: Catholic, or as Austin Ruse told Joe and Joe in our interview with him, all right, quoting de Tocqueville, Catholic or pantheist. We're in the pantheist stage right now. All roads lead to heaven, Joe Rossinello. Don't you know that? Your God is as good as my God, is as good as his God. And Allah and Yahweh and Jesus and Buddha and all that. Okay, it's all that nonsense. So we do live in a pantheist society, multiple gods, okay? Or it's going to go Catholic. We think it's going to go Catholic. Why? Because they latch onto what my partner Joe Rossinello says all the time. Issues that are losers for them. They're losers politically. They're losers morally. Because like I said, regardless of the politics of it, a guy whose daughter's 14 years old, who's on the soccer team, who goes in the locker room, okay, he's not going to tolerate a 17-year-old boy in that locker room with her. It's that simple.
Well, it's an overplayed hand. And also, here's another thing. You can't build on sand. Like all things in Scripture, it says it very clearly, all things that are not of God turn to dust. I've seen that in my own life. That's one of the reasons why, to be honest with you, I cling desperately to the Catholic Church. To be truthful with you, it's not just because I acknowledge Christ. I'm going to tell you there's a selfish reason there, because I know it's the only way to thrive and have a good life, because I've tried it and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And people should figure that out, but I can't force that on people. People have to figure it out for themselves.
There goes that free will again, Joe.
But again, it doesn't work. It simply doesn't. These ideas, you can't build a society on them. They won't work, and they don't work.
But you understand the obstinacy, particularly of the left, okay? We've seen that. In the last 100 years, we've seen it with our eyes, how these regimes that are very, very powerful. No one's going to deny the power that Stalin had, or the iron grip that Castro, but mainly because he was supported by lefties in the West. But the iron grip he had on Cuba, or Mao, or Xi Jinping. Okay, nobody's going to deny the amount of power that they have. Okay, or had at a particular time, but it's built on nothing. It's not built on nothing. It's all built on lies. Communism and this supposed utopia that they try to create, it's built on lies. All the premises of communism, all the tenets, every single thing is a lie. From state ownership of the means of production, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, they're all lies. That's why no matter how much power they gain in the short term, like Joe said, China's not going to last forever. China might not. This regime, my father used to say all the time, they'll loot the country beyond belief, and then eventually they'll all retire to France. All the communist bigwigs, and then they'll just leave the country. Now he might have been talking. He might have been talking a little tongue in cheek. Okay, but eventually, they loot everything, and if they just hopefully they will just get out of there. I mean, that remains to be seen.
But even
communists don't like to leave their power.
But getting back to these bad ideas, and even these are personal ideas that people choose. I mean, I've seen it happen time and time again in the arc of life. It doesn't work, and it's not meant to work. You see, again, when we go against the natural law, there's trouble in our own life. It's just the way it is, and there's no getting around it. You see, people sadly just double down and triple down, and they double down. I've used this example in the past. There's a movie from Omar Sharif. He plays. It's a B movie, but it's actually pretty decent. St. Peter, and there was this exchange between him and a Roman senator, and the senator is criticizing Peter as he's preaching in a plaza to poor people, and he starts saying these things, and Peter just cuts him off, and he just says, "Tell yourself that," and then goes on and continues, because he's utterly convinced in what he's grounded in. And by the way, he also knows that you're grounded in nothing.
Right?
You're grounded in nothing, and it's not anything that you could build upon.
Right.
You can't build a society on these ideas. Yeah. And here's the deal. You may have your hour, but that's all you're going to get. That's all you're going to get. It's going to collapse. Listen, I'm going to tell you this right now. Whether you're the president of the United States or you clean the street, everyone comes from a family. And I've seen this with my own two eyes. Whether they are educated or not. People who come from loving, good, caring homes, not perfect homes, 2 parents, a mom and a dad, working hard, dedicated to raising kids. The kids always know that they love them. Those kids are healthy. And the odds that they will be healthy are so much greater than when you're not from that. And I have seen that with my own eyes.
Let's leave that there. You were at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello. We're way in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. And just to put a finer point on it, we covered a couple weeks ago with the donor list laws. You know who didn't care about it one way or the other? Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood. You want to know why? They're not in danger of losing any donors. You want to know why? Because if they do, they know they get hundreds of millions of dollars from the government. How disgusting is that? They'd care if that spigot was turned off, okay, which somebody needs to turn off government state funding, whether on the federal or state level, of abortion, okay? But it's funny, they don't have a dog in this fight, Joe, because when you get a few $100 million from the government, you don't have to worry about private donors. So let's move on, Joe. We have a few minutes before the before the end of the segment, and we go to a break. So Jill Biden, I was telling Joe before the show, Jill Biden, she may make me more sick than her husband.
Well, she was on the cover of Vogue recently, and interestingly enough, they snubbed Melania Trump.
Of course.
Which is
the most elegant first lady in American history.
I mean, in terms of also the way she dressed,
everything, the way she carried herself. Okay, knows everything. Okay, she did nothing wrong except the fact that she was married to the orange man. Bad. All right, but Vogue doesn't want anything to do with her. They'll put that troll Hillary Clinton on the cover. Okay, they'll put Michelle Obama on the cover. Okay, but they won't put Melania Trump, and then they put this other troll, Jill Biden.
Well, he did heal the country, Joe.
Well, you know, CNN said that, by the way. Look at the lights surrounding the reflecting pool. It's as though it's Joe Biden's arms extending out to the American people. I'm not joking even a little bit. CNN said that the camera was on the reflecting pool. It was the nighttime. The lights along there looked like arms. And that's what this, I don't know if it was,
that is absurd.
Joe Biden's arms reaching out to the American people to heal a wounded nation. You wounded it, you bunch of scumbags. People like you and people like all the people at MSNBC and all the people at academia. You're the ones that ruined it. You hated Trump because he called you out on your BS. And Biden's going to heal the country. Well, St. Jill Biden says that, go ahead, Joe, kick it off.
Well, basically, do we have the time or we got to go to a break?
No, we got a minute. Start it off.
I mean, basically, let's just talk about like the healing of the nation. Under Biden, violent crime has surged in Democratic-run cities. It was there before. It's gotten even worse. That's provable through statistics.
Except because you've been talking about, what's her name from Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, who will cite you, arrest you, and take you to jail. She got into it with a reporter from Newsmax. If you saw the press conference, okay, because she's trying to say that crime's going down in Chicago. And I'm following the data. Because if you look at the numbers, crime's going up, you idiot.
Oh my gosh, it's absurd.
That woman is not only scary looking, she's scary.
Well, obviously, inflation is hiking up prices and depressing purchasing power for working Americans.
But this is the party of the working man.
A reported 1 million immigrants are illegally crossing our border.
Again, party of the working man.
And expanded federal unemployment payments continue to slow down growth in states that keep paying people not to work. Now, this is the man that's healing the nation. But again, you'll say this to people, and they just selectively ignore it. Right. That's the sick part. To be honest with you.
Right. The only people that can be truly happy about Biden is the abortion crowd. Because of what he did on the executive level. I mean, they're really the only ones that can be happy because he's the only one. They're the only group that he was able to do anything for. Somebody show me or correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, maybe I'm misinformed. What has he done?
No, well, we can break that down. I have my own theories on the 47% that consistently vote, Democratic, and
that number's going down.
But I mean, there's probably out of that percentage, 33% that are basically no matter what happens, if Joe Biden broke into your house, they'd still vote for him.
Right.
That's sad. But there's probably of that 47%, 33%. But I'll be honest with you, that other 14%, because I know people who are rational, and who vote on the Democratic Party. Again, we don't agree on the abortion, but I'm just talking about their functioning people who are historically Democrats. They're not for a lot of this stuff. And frankly, I think they're losing them. And I've even heard that they're saying now, I've read articles that Harris can't carry the ticket. Joe.
No, that woman.
No, but they're saying it now.
I don't know why people would have been duped by Biden. But let's take a break. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, Way in the Breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Please remember to follow Joe and I across social media. Wherever you find us, click something that's going to help us. We are on Patreon if you want to donate a couple bucks on a monthly basis. Doesn't have to be a lot, but anything helps. Patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And two, very quickly, download the Veritas Catholic Network mobile app if you want to hear Joe and my interviews on AM radio with some great Catholic personalities. And finally, Mike Church and the Crusade Channel doing a subscriber push. Okay, so go on the website, crusadechannel.com, hit listen free, take advantage of the free trial subscription. We're convinced you're going to want to become a subscriber. So stick around. We'll talk to you on the other side of the break. Welcome back, everyone, to the front. Joe, wait a minute. Biden's the president. I could breathe. I could breathe. I couldn't even get through the introduction.
He has healed the nation.
Jill Biden has healed me.
Well,
she's like Mother Mary.
When these statements like that are made, and I didn't hear that one from CNN that he's like hugging.
That is true.
No, I believe it.
As I'm telling you my name, that is what they say. It looks like Joe Biden's arms reaching out to the American people.
I could remember when Obama ran a second term. I was convinced he was going to lose because the economy was in the sewer. A lot of people said it was the second worst economic situation since the Great Depression. They call it the Great Recession.
Right. For which he blamed Bush.
But, you know, we can go on and on about that. But in terms of, I was convinced he was going to lose. And I can remember watching the Democratic convention and people were like, things are great. I mean, meanwhile, like I hadn't had a raise in like 4 years. I was laid off twice. I mean, like I could think of, I mean, I can go on, people losing their houses because of the mortgage crisis. And people are like, things are great. I'm like, these people are crazy.
Right.
Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And it's the same type of thing. My wife told me recently that Connecticut, with regard to trucking, they're going to basically tax every mile 17 cents for trucks going through the state. Dude, that's devastating.
And I mean, this is a blue state. Supposedly, they're supposed to be for the working man. But you're going to do that to a guy who owns a tractor.
Well, he's done.
Who picks up trailers and drives them so that you could get your products at Walmart.
That's the whole thing. Like, here's the thing. And someone commented on it in the press conference, and they basically said, well, they gave him like that green environmental thing. But it's like, are you living in reality?
Let me tell you something. Rufus, with his beard down to his chest, who's driving that tractor trailer
from the middle of Indiana,
all right, who drives 18 hours at a clip because he's got to put food on the table. Okay, Rufus doesn't want to hear your lies, your green lies, because that's all they are lies. Okay, and you want to put him out of business, and he doesn't want your universal basic income, Andrew Yang. The man wants to drive a truck. He wants to earn his own money. You get off his back because his truck is not going to destroy the planet. I got news for you.
But even like, okay, let's just look at that for a second. Let's forget about the woke crapola. Is that realistic? Like, if, first of all, you're going to put out all small businesses with regard to small trucking businesses, you're out of business.
Right.
You can't absorb that. Now, if you can absorb it, like say milk, Tuscan milk, I'm sure that they have like dairy farms in Wisconsin. I mean, I don't follow them, but they're huge. Mm-hmm. The point is they can absorb it. All they're going to do is pass it on to you.
Right.
The prices are going to go up of everything.
Well, they have to. For the truck driver to stay in business, whatever he gets tagged per mile, he's got to add to the bill.
Yet people will defend the Democratic Party. Like, that is, to me, again, objectively speaking, a horrible idea.
Yeah, why can't we just say that's a bad idea?
They said they'll make $90 billion or something from it. Or like, I forget the...
So the state gets billions. Rufus is out of a job, and I'm supposed to be happy with that.
But here's the thing, just from a perspective of a person, like even if you call yourself a Democrat, how could you think that that's a good idea? That is a horrible idea. Because here's the thing. What are you trying to force people to not use gas? Well, guess what, guys? We're far from that right now. Maybe one day we'll get there, but right now we're not.
Joe, I'll be honest with you. Just to digress for a second, okay? I'm starting. I've always said I got no problem driving an electric car if the prices come down, okay, and they make them reasonable for working people. If you could work out the battery situation, okay, I got no problem owning an electric car. Can the electric car do 80 down the New Jersey Turnpike? That's all I want to know. Can I play the radio when I'm driving? That's all I want. Does it look pretty good? Oh, no, Teslas look pretty good. I got no problem with it. I'll be honest with you. I've been following the EV stocks lately, the electric vehicle stocks, and the charging stations, things like that. Mercedes-Benz is putting a lot of money into them. Ford is going to put $30 billion into them. Bottom line is the market, corporations, the market is starting to push the idea of moving from let's say, for example, gas-powered cars to electric cars, and they are investing in it. I got no problem with that because one of those companies is going to make one of those cars that I'm going to be able to afford, okay? And I got no problem with it. But that's an evolution of the market.
Well,
that's not forced by the government.
But also, you got to talk about practicality, Joe. I mean, you buy that car and you don't have gas options or electric options. Say you're driving across the country. Say you're driving from New Jersey to Ohio and you're in the middle of Pennsylvania.
Well, that's why what they're doing, my understanding is, not to get too much into it, my understanding is they want to set it up just so that the electric power stations and swap stations where you get your old battery taken, like you fill up a tank of gas. You stop, you give them the old battery, they give you the new one, you charge, you go. You pay for it.
But we're not there.
They're still building it out. We're not, but my point is that it's not imposed. They are pouring billions of their own corporate money into this. All right. They're planning to do it because the market seems at some point to be ready. They're not there yet. The infrastructure's not there completely. They still have to build it out. But when they do, it's going to be a viable.
Listen,
and the trucks are going to be, the truck driver will be able to own probably an electric truck.
And that works. But my point is, in the meantime, you tax the truck driver 17 cents a mile.
No, that's disgusting.
I mean, and this is where I say they're bad ideas. I'm telling you right now, the ideas, listen, some of the ideas on the Republican side of the house stink too.
Oh, yeah.
But my point is, that's a bad idea. And I got news for you. That's a regressive tax on the poor.
Casey Royals fan, one of our loyal supporters, she says, I got a better suggestion, Flintstone cars. You know, remember Fred Flintstone and Barney? And they got their feet moving on the ground? Maybe we're going to go back to that, Joe.
Maybe so. But I mean, I don't know. I just, like I said, some of these ideas, and I can't believe any rational person would support it. Because to be honest with you, listen, if you're really rich, it doesn't matter. I got news for you. Just pay the bill. I'm telling you, if you just pay the bill, it doesn't matter. But most people aren't rich.
Right.
And you're going to feel that. I'm telling you right now, your grocery bill is going to go up considerably.
Well, as you always say, they're not going to take any loss. They're simply going to pass it on to you.
Of course, that's the way it works.
It's always the way it works. Because ultimately, everything they do, I mean, E. Michael Jones talks about this beyond belief. Everything is about theft of labor. Whether they outright enslave you, whether they hit you with all these taxes, no matter whether they pass it along in consumer prices, it's all designed to steal your labor. That's what it is. That's why they want open borders, both on right and left, and Chinese workers and others coming into the country, because they want to steal your labor and their labor, and they don't want to pay you your rightful just family wage. They want to dilute your wages. We covered 2 weeks ago, the construction industry 40 years ago was paying about $40 an hour. The average now is about $11 an hour. All right? That's not according to Joe. That's according to the stats. This is what the oligarchs do, both on right and left. Okay? And people need to wake up. They say, look, the earth's not dying because I'm driving a Cadillac or because Rufus is driving a Peterbilt. Okay, it's just not happening. You're not going to prove it to us because we had a couple of 95-degree days in New Jersey.
Dude,
believe it happens once in a while. We get 90-degree days in New Jersey.
I love the name Rufus, by the way.
Well, I knew a truck driver named Rufus. I knew a lot. I was in trucking years ago when I was a kid, and yeah, so I knew a lot of over the road guys. And you know, guys would talk like this. Joe, I drive 18 hours right here from Port Elizabeth, New Jersey, out to Indianapolis, drop off my tractor, go home.
Dude,
I drop off my trailer, I go kiss my wife and my kids, and I go to sleep, and I get up, and I go and do it again.
Dude, I used to unload trucks in Port Carteret, and I'll be honest with you, they're the craziest bastards I've ever met in my life. They used to go under. I used to know this one dude. He used to do a local route. I kid you not. He'd come in. Our shop steward, he'd come in, I'd unload the truck, I'd see them both under the truck smoking a joint, he'd get back in the truck and drive away.
Yeah, no.
I used to be like, there he is.
Listen, you don't want to know some of the things that over the road drivers say. But anyway, I mean, that's where we're at. We could all breathe again. And you know, Joe Biden and his regime's installed, and Jill says we could all breathe again, both because of his green policy and the fact that the orange man bad is no longer there, and we got rid of the real cancer.
At least there's no more mean tweets, Joe. We're all healed.
If you tried to show this decrepit old man how to tweet, okay, he would forget in 5 seconds how to do it, and you just showed him. Okay, he doesn't tweet because he can't even think right now.
Oh, dude.
I mean, my over-under's gone. Unless in the next month, I mean, my original over-under was August, okay? I think that's going to get blown out. I'm going to be wrong. but I'm not giving it too long. I mean, you said earlier the Democrats are saying Kamala.
She can't carry.
Can't carry,
I could have said that a while ago.
They're
talking
why?
about
Because she's a nasty broad. And yeah, Ashley Judd, she's a nasty woman. So are you, by the way. So is Madonna. So are the rest of your horrid crew in your baby-killing abortion movement, okay? In other words, but she's a nasty.
They're talking about
Kamala Harris is a nasty woman.
Bringing Buttigieg back into that's.
But of course. Well, listen, Joe's out. Let's say Biden's out. You're going to get the first female African American president. She's going to be a lot of firsts, not elected, of course. And you're going to get Pete Buttigieg, the first gay vice president.
I don't think any.
And then when they knock her off, then Buttigieg will become the first gay president.
I don't think any of it's going to work, to be honest with you.
You remember? I think I told you. For those of you who know Roman history, they had a couple of moments after the empire was established, where you had the year of 3 emperors. Okay, we may have the 4-year term of 3 presidents. Get rid of Biden. Then they get rid of Harris, okay, because Buttigieg, they'll really want to put the gay man in the Oval Office, okay, and then they'll shame the country in 2024 and having to vote for him, and then he'll be out, okay, and then maybe we'll get some sanity back,
dude.
But that's I'm for look, if it can happen to the Romans, it can happen to us. Biden, Harris, then Buttigieg, then bye Democrats.
Maybe RuPaul will run for office.
Would you be shocked?
No.
Would you be shocked?
I actually think RuPaul is going to be nominated for a Supreme Court spot, dude.
Listen,
I think that's the next move.
If Richard/Rachel Levine could be the Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services,
I do.
Okay?
I think RuPaul's coming in.
You think for a second you're not going to get a transgender?
No, that's my
if
point.
They pack the court, okay? If they pack the court, that's a lifetime appointment. If they're not going to do it. They can't do it because Sinema and Manchin are going to stand in the way. They're just not going to be able to do it. Like I said, the only way they do it is they get oligarch George Soros on the phone and say, look, you got to transfer Joe Manchin $100 million, and he's just going to set up his family forever, put it into the bank, and he'll vote to do away with the filibuster, and we'll be able to do what we want. And even then, I don't think Joe Manchin would take it. I think he actually means it when he says, I don't believe in the filibuster. I'm not going to support it. But remember, we are all healed according to Joe Biden. And you're at
the arms of the
arms of the reflecting pool are like the arms of Joe Biden, reaching out to a hurt and wounded nation, looking to heal them. I mean, this is the type of drivel you get from CNN and MSNBC, but you don't get dribble at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello weighing the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Here we go. More nonsense. Joe Resinello, hit me.
Well, Dr. Susan Berry reports that science says transgender hormones and surgeries do not prevent suicide. Interesting. Transgender activists continue to pressure parents and politicians with the threat of suicide should a young person claim to be transgender and not receive total affirmation of their new identity. Significant research and study, however, has found that transgender medical interventions such as puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and sex transition surgeries do not prevent suicide or improve mental health in gender dysphoric young people. Listen, this has been said time and time again. We brought this up. We talked about Dr. Paul McHugh from Johns Hopkins.
He's mentioned in this article
yes,
too.
Yes, he is.
Yep.
I mean, and the article basically goes on to say how there's this new documentary out. It's called Transmission: What the Rush to Reassign Gender, and basically talking about how doctors scare people, scare like parents into this, woke doctors. I mean,
and they convince them, but real quick, just to clarify, Joe, they convince the parents that if they don't affirm their child, the kid's going to kill themselves. That's what they do. Now, any parent's going to get nervous because remember, we are talking about doctors, and doctors are smarter than parents, and doctors are certainly smarter than Joe and Joe. Okay, so let's get it straight. These are evil people. They're scaring parents into affirming these kids in what really is going to create suicidal tendencies, which is what Joe's entire point is in talking about this article. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, but basically it comes down to this. You can't change who you are. It's like the wrapping paper on anything. Like, you are who you are, and it's proven that what drives a lot of these people to suicide, and by the way, I don't even think their life expectancy is over 40.
No, the suicide rate is ridiculous.
It's off the hook.
And it's not because of Catholics like Joe and I.
What it is,
because of you.
And it's because, what's his name? Walt Heyer.
Walt Heyer will tell you this.
And I've read about him. He was a gentleman who transitioned from the body, like outward body of from a man to a woman, and then back to a man.
And what did he say? He said, I was lied to.
But also, I think what it is the reason why I think a lot of these people get driven to suicide is their expectations aren't met.
Yes.
You see, what happens is they do this and it doesn't change. It's like anything else. Again, when you're an adult, okay, I'm going to throw again some common sense. If you haven't figured this out as an adult, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You basically, it's like, I've thought about this in my own life, like as a practicing Catholic. I could either have the grace that comes with living a sacramental life, and with that comes peace. With that comes deep joy. I sleep very well. Or I put that down and I take other things that could give me temporary pleasure, but I'm not going to have those things. Here's the bottom line. You can't have both. You see, adults figure that out, who are looking at the world rationally and realistically.
But that's why, Joe Resinello, along the lines of what you're saying on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online, these people need help. They need therapy. That's what they need. They need grace more than anything. But they need to stop acting like children, okay? And they need to grow up. That requires outreach. That requires compassion. That requires therapy. The left is telling you, if you recommend therapy for these people, you hate them. And I say, no, you're affirming them in a self-destructive lifestyle. You're the one that hates them, and not us.
And here's the funny part. Not too long ago, the medical profession said it straight out.
Listen, the scientists, Joe, along your line, scientists are fighting back. An article at the Public Discourse by family physician Dr. Andre Van Mol of the American College of Pediatricians, endocrinologist Dr. Michael Laidlaw, and psychiatrist Dr. Miriam Grossman and Dr. Paul McHugh noted the authors of the original study retracted its conclusion after numerous requests for a reanalysis of the data led to corrected findings. What is that? What is that a way of saying? They lied.
Well, they didn't like the outcome, so they said they have to reassess it.
Right. They had no. The original study, they lied in the original study. And then when pushback from McHugh and others was brought back to them, and they said they pushed back and they told them this stuff is wrong. Then they retracted it.
Oh, that's okay.
Then they retracted it because you see, this is why you must speak the truth. This is why when people say, well, what are you doing? Just talking. No. Speech is powerful. Speech is powerful. That's why we have a protected right to free speech, because people open their mouth. Okay. This study, okay, was refuted. It was withdrawn. It was reworked, and it was corrected.
Well, tell them who did the study, because these are not lightweights. You have basically.
This is the American Journal of Psychology. Yeah. They released a correction to a 2019 Swedish study, which drew its primary conclusion.
Oh, they're dirty people, those
Swedish. Their primary conclusion that individuals who claim to be transgender experience mental health benefits following gender-affirming surgeries. That was a lie, and that's what they had to withdraw. So that's what there was a pushback against, and it was corrected. Again, why? Because people opened their mouth. They opened their mouth. And in this case, it's scientists like Dr. Paul McHugh, Dr. Miriam Grossman, because they opened their mouth and said, no. You're not acting like a doctor. You're not acting like somebody who actually cares about people. You seem to have an agenda. This is faulty, this study, and you need to correct it. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Way in the breach. We got one more segment left. Stick around. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, weighing the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. We're going to keep it moving because we got one more segment. We want to try to get to a couple stories. With that, I'm handing it over to Joe.
Well, this comes from Thomas Williams. He reports that the president of the Pontifical Academy for Life, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia.
Joe. Say it like an Italian. Vincenzo Paglia.
There we go.
My wife says to me every time I speak Italian or say something in Italian, she says, "Why do you have to get so angry?" I say, because I grew up with angry Italians. So when they spoke Italian, usually directed at me,
Paglia.
Vincenzo Paglia. Go ahead.
Well, anyway, he
is the head of the Pontifical Academy for Life.
He criticized an anti-homophobic bill, basically, that's being debated in the Italian parliament, calling for this gentleman, he says it's more of a manifesto than a law. The draft legislation introduced by Alessandro Van, an openly gay parliamentarian and LGBT activist, this is in Italy, which would ban hate speech and force all schools to mark a national day against homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. I mean, clearly we're not here to torment anybody, particularly Catholics, but this is the nefarious part. It says, has come under fire for the vague language that critics insist can be used to stifle free speech.
Of course.
And Paglia goes on to say that the text poses a serious risk of threatening freedom of expression and thought, as well as discrimination against the religious sentiment of a large portion of the Italian people. Now, this is what a couple points. One, vague language. That's what lawyers do. They write things in a vague way because it gives you elbow room. See, that's a tool of a lawyer. You basically create something whereby you address it, but you don't. And it gives you wiggle room. So that's what this gentleman is doing in Italy. Basically, what he's going to say is, if you come out and say that I'm just for traditional marriage, I don't support same-sex marriage, somehow that falls under this, you're a homophobe.
Right. According to Alessandro Zan, we say it all the time. He's the guy who we talk about. We didn't know his name before this article, but he's the guy. Okay. He represents those people who would say, when Joe and I say marriage, and all of you, all right, marriage is between one man and one woman. That's hate speech, for which, Joe, this is legislation, Joe. Yeah. That means you could go to jail.
But this is, again, vague language is weaponized. I mean, to be honest with you, this is what corporations do. I know exactly how this game is played. You have to address something and you kind of word it in a way. That's what's going on here. That's what lawyers do. But also another thing I'd like to bring up, he said, it does not represent the religious sentiment of a large portion of the Italian people. Now, I personally think not only is that the case in Italy, but it's also the case here. And what's his face has said that in Florida, DeSantis, and also I've also read this with regard to other pieces of legislation that are coming out from the left. It doesn't represent the people. You see, this is why ultimately it's going to lose. I'm telling you right now, because the people, as in the average American, even the average Democrat, they're not for these ideas. Mm-hmm. They don't represent the people. It's an elite organization, corporation, or politician that has these ideas, but the people don't approve of them.
And I don't know how on earth this raging minority could get away with this when what Joe is saying is correct. You're not going to convince me that just because we see commercial after commercial after commercial with two men kissing, two women kissing, all this nonsense, you're going to tell me the American people accept this. The Democrat Party in America forced this on us, and through the advertising industry, force us to believe that the majority of Americans are for this. They're not.
Well, it's funny.
And you know what? The Italians aren't either.
Well, it's funny, Joe. And I mean, there's sort of like an expression going on. They say, if you go woke, you go broke. And I mean, we're seeing it in terms of even the media. I saw the numbers. Jake Tapper, his show is down significantly.
Why would any?
But I'm just saying, like if you are like, listen, because business comes down to business. It comes down to greenbacks. Ultimately, that's how things work when it comes to, like, if you're looking at like spreadsheets and you're on boards. you know, hold your, like, whatever ideas you have, fine. But if you stop making money, that's when people knock on your door and say, listen, no one's watching. No one's like baseball, Sunday night baseball. It's down 49%. No one's watching the NBA. The NFL is down. They're losing money. They're losing money. And this is what I'm saying. The people are not about this. They're simply not. And that's why ultimately I'm telling you right now, enjoy your hour, because that's all you're going to get. I'm telling you this right now. Ultimately, none of this stuff is going to last long because people are fed up.
And you know what? When you get representatives that are supporting this type of drivel, now, if I remember correctly, I may be wrong, but I don't think I am. Mussolini's granddaughter, Alessandro Mussolini, and I'm talking about the granddaughter of Il Duce himself, all right, Benito Mussolini. I believe she was a porn star. I don't remember
You're
correctly.
kidding me.
I believe she's a porn star or was at some point, okay? And she is in Italian politics. She is. She's like, she represents.
Well, Italy's politics is a
well, it's a basket
disgrace.
case.
It's a
I don't know if
disgrace.
she's still a member of parliament, but nonetheless, Alessandro Mussolini has come out. Here's a shock. She's come out in favor of the Zan bill, saying she has hoped a campaign for a battle that I consider more than fair. She posted a photo on social media showing her with Zan bill written in the palm of her hand and dressed in a flamboyant costume with rainbow colors in support of the legislation. There's an example of the type of Italian that's supporting this. The granddaughter of Il Duce, Benito Mussolini. She supports it, Joe.
Well, here's the deal. Like I said, I was worried. I'm not at all, honestly, because the people are not backing it. And the advantage that the left has is the press. But ultimately, the kimono opens. And frankly, I think the kimono is open on the Biden regime. I think a lot of people are disappointed. And here's the thing. Again, we'll break down the demographic. I remember when Romney debated Obama, and he said, you're going to get 47% of the vote no matter what. And he's right. Sadly, too many people just pull the lever for their tribe, their political tribe. But here's the thing. It's the independents that decide the president. It's the way it is. My mother has always said that. She's 100% right. You've lost those independents.
Joe, real quick, I want to make a comment to Dave the Herman, who's one of our listeners. He says this stuff won't last, but it's been signed into law. It's been around for 50 years. Dave, I agree with you, but the bottom line is this, though: 50 years is not a very long time in the grand scheme of things. Like, if you have movements, political movements, historical movements, 50 years ain't a long time. At least in my opinion. So when Joe says it's not going to last, we don't think it's going to. It certainly is not going to have any roots. It's not going to bear any good fruit, and eventually it's going to go away. Now, whether it's going to go 100 years, 70 years, end tomorrow, okay, 50 years is in a very long time, and especially since for the last 50 years we've been living like I don't know what in America, not paying attention to this stuff. But right now, the word woke should be applied to us because we're the ones that are actually fighting against all these lies. So I would just respectfully disagree. I don't think 50 years is a long time.
But even I'm talking about some of the ideas that have been proposed recently, like this transgender bathroom stuff, like boys playing on girls' sports. That's not going to last. I'm telling you right now, because people are losing interest in it. The Olympics is a joke. It didn't even start yet. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment.
Who the hell is going to watch
That's
the
my
Olympics?
point. So, like, eventually it's the dollars, I think, that are going to move it. And frankly, you're seeing it already in school districts. People are starting to show up and basically are saying, I'm not having this. I'm not having it.
Perfect segue into our next story. We have a little bit of time. We want to try to get to as many conversations as we can. All right, perfect segue. Joe said people are not having this. Okay, so he's talking about transgenderism. But also on the other side, when you're talking about abortion, Joe, let's go to Iowa.
Well, basically, Raymond Wolf of LifeSite basically said that the Iowa Supreme Court ruled that the state can ban abortion providers like Planned Parenthood from taxpayer-funded sexual education programs. It was a 6-1 decision, by the way, too. The High Court ruled in favor of legislation passed by the Iowa lawmakers and signed by Governor Kim Reynolds. She's a Republican in Iowa. And the law is was it 766, House File 766. It includes sections that block abortion providers from receiving federal grant money through 2 sexual educations and teen pregnancy prevention programs.
Stop right there. That's a euphemism for Planned Parenthood marketing scheme in the public schools to young girls.
Well, I mean,
nothing educational about it. They're trying to build a future customer base.
Well, but not just that. I mean, here's the thing. It comes down to this. Whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're religious or not, whether you're a conservative or not, you're the parent. And they're getting in between you and your kid. That's a fact. Actually, Planned Parenthood actually calls this, they have a term for it. They call your barriers to service, the parent.
Right.
Here's the deal. Don't give my child your version of a healthy sexual relationship.
Right.
I don't care what your political stripe is. I also don't care what your religion is. It's not my version, and I'm the parent. And as my father would say, and that's my department. It's my department. Right. I want you to teach math. If you teach math, teach math.
Right.
Here's another thing. If I was an administrator in a school, irregardless of what I believe, politically speaking, if this would be my message to my teachers, if I was a principal, if your students know your political affiliation, you failed them. Your job is not to basically communicate your personal beliefs. Your job is to teach the subject that you're hired to teach. That's it. Even if it's civics, teach civics, facts. It's not your job to project your ideas. And I would say that very clearly, whether you're a conservative or you're a liberal.
What I really like about this situation that we're talking about in Iowa here on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. I really like this opinion by Justice Dana Oxley. Now, here's what I mean. Unlike our Supreme Court that tries to find some kind of conciliatory language, it's like Kavanaugh. Like Kavanaugh nauseatingly apologized for when he wrote an opinion and concurred with the majority in a case that dealt a blow to the LGBT crowd, okay? Which is disgusting. Don't apologize to them. They don't apologize to you. In this particular case, Justice Oxley, she noted that there were 3 different. Now, this is an assertion, not a defense. What Joe and I say all the time. This is when you go on offense. You're not defending anything. You go on offense against, in this case, Planned Parenthood. Okay. She said she noted 3 different purposes for Iowa's exclusion of Planned Parenthood, affirming all of those purposes as quote unquote legitimate. The state, she said, presented 3 different purposes for the law: to express its preference for childbirth over abortion, yay; to ensure that its state-sponsored sexual education message is not delivered by entities that derive significant revenue from abortion-related activities, yay; and to avoid indirectly subsidizing abortion providers. Do you understand the language there, Joe? It's going on the offensive. Telling Planned Parenthood, no. Now, you can call them educational programs all you want. What they are is a marketing scheme for you to get to our girls in particular. The answer is no. You're not getting a dime. You're inferior and you're disgusting and your evil agenda is not allowed here. And not only that, we are going to teach them that childbirth is preferable to abortion. We're going to promote that. We're going to promote messages like that. And Planned Parenthood and their allies can't stand it.
But again, it's not their business. And frankly, this is where the public school has just gone off the rail. And that's why I absolutely don't back it. One of the things, and Joe Pasillo has said this, and I agree with him 100%. The president, Donald Trump, actually tried to do things the right way. He put in DeVos to kind of fight the establishment. She failed miserably. They wouldn't have it. You just abolish the Department of Education.
Oh, that needs to happen.
And education is done on the local level. That's right. Here's the thing. If you want to live in crazy ass woke Washington state where you could teach a 5-year-old about anal sex and you're fine with that in your little community, That's your business. That's your business. But here's the deal. I'm not paying for it. I'm not paying for it, nor do I want that in my community.
That's right.
Sorry. And you know something? This is the nefarious part about it. They know that they're indoctrinating these kids.
Well, so here's the thing.
This is an absolute fact.
You're right, Joe. I love when we get people who are quote unquote like whistleblowers. In 2019, a former Planned Parenthood sex education teacher, Monica Klein, described how Planned Parenthood uses school programs to groom girls to have abortions. He says, quote, the sex education grooms girls for promiscuity, grooms them for STD treatment, and grooms them for, hang on to your seat, abortion.
And again,
close quote.
That's stay in your lane. It's not your business. It's my business to teach my kids about what a healthy relationship is. That begins by them watching me and my wife, by the way. That's the best homily that you're ever going to give, your kids are ever going to hear, is watching you. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
But number two, I'm not interested in anyone. I don't care. It's not your business to tell my kid what a healthy relationship is. Hooking up, living outside of marriage. That's not your business. It's my kid. It's my kid. And this is where, again, the privates, the public schools, I don't even know how they get away with it. Now, even worse.
People are waking up, Joe Rissino. There's a lot of videos on YouTube. These parents, it's starting with critical race theory, because no parent wants a teacher to teach their kid that they to hate themselves, number one, because of the color of their skin, or to recognize the first thing about another kid, their skin color. They're fighting against this. CRT is racist. You hear that, Joy Reid? I'll come on your show. Joe and Joe will be at your show, and we'll explain to you point by point how your support of CRT, critical race theory, yours and Ibram Kendi and all of it, is racist and Marxist, okay? Fighting against you is not racist. Fight against you is something that everybody ought to do, because you're a liar, okay? But the fact is, Joe, people are waking up. People are going to the school boards. People are making noise. And you know what, Joe? Eventually, people are going to start running for those school board seats, and they're going to oust these people.
Well, again, it's the people aren't for these ideas.
Well, that's why these parents are fighting back.
That's exactly it.
That's why they're fighting
because
back.
Again, I'm talking even Democrats. I have like one friend who is he's a Democrat, and we talk. He's not woke, he's not like irrational. We just don't agree on certain things, but he's not for this stuff. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Functional people who live in towns, not necessarily cities, that are normal, financially speaking, normal, pay bills, work hard, raise kids, they're not for this. Sorry, they're not for it. And when you start dealing with someone's kids, you touch a nerve. And that's why this isn't going to fly. I'm telling you, this is not going to fly. You're going to tell somebody that some boy is going to shower in the locker room after a girl's basketball game. What, are you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. That's not even going to fly in a liberal city, in a liberal state. It's not going to fly. So, and like I said, all it's going to take is one incident where there's an assault, and it'll happen. No doubt about it.
The media, I guarantee you, won't cover it when it does happen.
But there'll be a lawsuit.
Right.
And then it's over.
Right.
And this is what I mean. These are bad ideas. They're simply bad ideas. Just like defund the police is a bad idea. Horrible idea from the very beginning. It was the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard of. The only people who are talking about it are people that are rich, who live in insulated communities. Because I got news for you. People who live in rough communities, like Newark or Camden, they want police.
So is it Maxine Waters doesn't live in South Central.
Oh, please.
All right, let's be clear about it. She's not near the bullets. Her constituents are, but she's not near the bullets. So it's like you said, to talk about defunding the police is absolutely ridiculous. Joe, we got time for a comment or two on Stacey Abrams?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is, I think, an interesting. We covered the woman who is one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, how she's buying properties left and right. She just bought a $1.2 million property in Malibu, ironically, a very white neighborhood.
So the black lesbian communist is in a lily white neighborhood
But
in Malibu in
I
a
digress.
$1.2 million mansion.
But now we have Stacey Abrams, who now owns 2 homes in Georgia worth $1.4 million, despite being in massive debt after a failed 2018 gubernatorial run. Now, here's some facts. When she ran in 2018, she owed the IRS $54,000 and had more than $400,000 in consumer debt and total liabilities owed. Now she somehow no longer has this $54,000 IRS debt, and she owns 2 homes worth $1.4 million. That's in 3 years, Joe?
Yeah.
Not bad. So again, this is where you say to yourself, these people just enrich themselves. Do you people have eyes? And, I could remember having a conversation with someone at work talking about Obama, who basically couldn't afford a home. When he was in Chicago, somebody like a corrupt guy actually lent him money that he bought a house. It was like a home when he was in Chicago as a senator. He didn't have the money. And then he winds up after the presidency buying a $40 million vacation home in Martha's Vineyard. The guy who owned it before him was the co-owner of the Boston Celtics. And I remember saying this at work to somebody, and they said, well, good for him. Good for him. That's a disgrace. That's a disgrace. Me and Joe went in November to protest in front of Joe Biden's house in Delaware. Let's just tell you this, guys. You can't even see the house from the road. Joe Biden never had a job in the private sector.
How did he get so rich?
He owns 2 homes, one in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and we saw the other one outside of it. He lives in a mansion. Listen, how is that happening? And yet we just let it go on.
That's why I said you and I should become liberal activists. We'll make a ton of money.
It's a disgrace.
We'll go to hell afterwards.
It's a disgrace. And yet people just excuse it.
Right.
Do you have eyes in your head? Like this person that I worked with, they said, good for him. Good for him.
Right.
Are you out of your mind?
What did he do?
What did he do?
Except to cost Americans their jobs and tell us we all have to get
the
used
damage
to
that guy caused
growth.
in this country. I
As
can't even tell you.
As far as Stacey Abrams is concerned, she blames her debt on racism. Again, everything with this woman is race. Somebody ought to just call her the racist that she is. How is it racism that you overspent money? You went out and borrowed money you didn't have. How is that racist? That's poor decision making on your part.
That's interesting because this is what she said. She said race and gender play a major role in determining how how big the financial disadvantage is. Listen, I know plenty of people who are Black, who are Hispanic, who did just fine in life. It's about decisions. It's about taking responsibility. How do you she had $400,000 worth of consumer debt? What are you, crazy?
What is she doing? Going to Lord and Taylor every other day?
That's absurd. $54,000 IRS bill.
Let's leave it there, Joe. We have to end the conversation. Thank you all for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Proud to be in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, go to crusadechannel.com, hit listen free, and you get all the station's content. And we know that you're going to want to be a subscriber to Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Kennedy Hall, Dave Simpson, and others on there. Brother Andre Marie, the King Dude himself, Mike Church, got a Frontline with Joe and Joe, got a great line up there. So please go to Crusade Channel and subscribe. Do the trial subscription. We know you're going to want to subscribe. Follow Joe and I anywhere you see us on social media. Like, subscribe, share, hit the little bell, do all that fun stuff. Patreon.com is there if you want to support us financially. Patreon.com/The Frontline with Joe and Joe. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation